Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to reintroduce to you now. Lisa Lanassa is a returning guest on our show. Be sure to check out her first appearance in episode 704 of Boundless Body Radio. Lisa Lanassa is a mom of two, wife, adventurer, coffee fanatic, and founder and CEO of diaVerge Diabetes. Lisa founded diaVerge Diabetes in 2015 after her own personal discovery of the empowerment and complete lifestyle transformation that can come from gaining better control of type 1 diabetes. She has successfully maintained A1C levels below 5.5% since January of 2015, a dramatic health transformation that led to an absolute reduction of over 3% after only 4 months. That is huge. Encouraged by her husband to write about her incredible health improvements, diaVerge was born while Lisa was living in the middle of Argentina after 13 years of daily struggle with type 1 diabetes. Lisa holds a Diabetes Paraprofessional Level II certificate through ADCES and Diabetes Educator certificate through IDF. Along with her extraordinary team, many of them impacted by type 1 diabetes personally, diaVerge brings everything they have learned from optimizing their own health and by teaching their clients around the world how to better manage blood sugar levels and reduce the burden of diabetes. Lisa Lanassa, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you back to Boundless Body Radio.
Thank you so much, Casey. It's great to be here.
It's great to see you again. It was so fun to actually meet you in person in San Diego 2024. You're living in Spain, so you weren't able to come to the show in 2025. At least I didn't run into you there. You weren't there, correct?
I was not there this year,
I would have been sure.
unfortunately.
Yeah, I would have been sure to give you a big hug if I would have seen you. But yeah, it was a really good conference that you missed. And you were just telling me that along with the certifications that we mentioned in the introduction, you actually just finished another one. Can you tell us about that?
I did. I'm finishing up a master's degree in health education and behavior right now. And I just this past weekend passed the Certified Health Education Specialist certification. So now I'll have a few other initials behind my name.
That's awesome. That's great. So, having accomplished this degree, what will this allow you to do more than you were doing before?
It brings about so much background information. I have the information about diabetes management and, working in diabetes management and living with it personally for the last 24 years. But this really brings about so much information about how people learn, about how to structure programs, about how to best help people create change in their lives. So that's fantastic. That's a passion of mine and something that I have really built diaVerge around. So
Yeah,
I'm
amazing.
thrilled to have a degree now that really puts all that together.
That's awesome. One thing that really stood out from somebody, I think you met her in the last conference, Roshani Singhani
Mhm.
from Mumbai, India.
Oh, she's
One of the
amazing.
things that she's incredible, and the whole idea of like you knowing the facts about metabolism, a disease, whatever it is, if you can't communicate that and get that across in a way that is motivational for somebody, it's a non-starter. You can't, share whatever knowledge you have unless you're able to communicate that effectively. And again, make sure that somebody feels motivated or feels like it was their idea and that kind of thing. And so learning how to communicate, I think, is so, so important.
Absolutely.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
she's she's a shining star in the world, and I love how she can connect with the people that she works with.
Yeah, she was absolutely amazing. This year, she made everybody actually practice what we talked about in 2024. So we actually have
Yeah,
live practices with like the person
yeah,
next to you. So there's a lot of chatter and a lot of feedback, but it was really good presentation. And yeah, her work is
yeah.
absolutely incredible. A shining light, a shining star in our space is definitely a great way to
Yeah.
describe it. Um, and I was this was kind of occurring to me. I think I told you last time that type 1 diabetes, fortunately for me, doesn't touch me personally in any particular way. I don't I am, besides people that I've met in the low carbohydrate space, people like yourself and Andrew Kudnick and all these amazing people, Nairi, um, I don't know many people that have to deal with this. And if you probably would have asked me maybe like 10 years ago if I had any interest in type 1 diabetes, I don't know what I would have said because again, it doesn't really impact me. Now, of course, even though it still doesn't impact me personally, understanding type 1 diabetes allows you to understand so much more about human metabolism. So time travel back 10 years and talk to me as a person that I don't have anybody with type 1 diabetes in my life. Why is this topic still important for all of us?
I think people with type 1 diabetes have a really interesting view into how our bodies work. And I think that is something that so many other people can learn from. So particularly when we're eating low carb, we can see exactly what food does to our bodies, exactly what we need, how insulin impacts our bodies, how stress, how exercise, you know, it's the whole metabolic package in a visible form for us, or at least that's how I see it. So I think it's really fascinating um, to be able to have this window into how my body works. And so I controversial view maybe, but I view diabetes as kind of a gift. You know, it's opened my eyes to how my body works, what my body needs, how I have to show up for myself every single day. And as tiring as it is sometimes, you know, it's absolutely exhausting some days when things aren't going according to plan. But it's still really a whole different perspective than what most people get ever about what their
Yeah.
bodies are doing. So in that respect, I'm grateful for this journey and for being able to experience both really standard diabetes management and then how much can improve with gaining better control of what I'm eating and
Yeah.
really reducing all of those extraneous factors, namely carbs that are affecting blood sugar level, weight, overall metabolic health, et cetera. So
Yeah, that's amazing. I was hoping you would go that direction with that question and answer, to go to the extent of saying that it's a gift. Like I said, the people that I know now that are experiencing type 1 diabetes, they're in the low carbohydrate space. And all I can tell you, just based on observation, is everybody looks like extra incredibly healthy. Like we mentioned, Andrew and Nairi and yourself and all
yeah.
these people, like once you understand what's going on, and yeah, you might have bad days and it's a 24/7 365 type of thing that you have to manage. But the gift side of it is you guys all look amazingly, incredibly healthy. And you hear about the teenagers who are diagnosed and they're like athletes and thriving and look way better than some of their peers in the same group. And again, there's things to manage and you have to be careful with a bunch of stuff that I'm sure some days you don't like. But the gift side of that, I think, is really, really important to acknowledge.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Yeah, and honestly, that's a practice though too. Just like any, gratitude or positivity practice, you have to make that conscious decision. Just like I'm making the conscious decision of how I'm going to treat my body every single day, I have to, part of that is our thoughts as well. So I know that's something that you feel strongly about is uh,
Yeah,
alongside me.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, if you wouldn't mind, remind us kind of your story, how this became such a big part of your life. And I will have some follow-up questions that I didn't ask you last time about your experience, your personal experience. But if you don't mind sharing your story about how
Sure.
this came about in your life.
So type 1 diabetes story or finding low carb story? There's a
Both. Let's
couple.
start with the type
Oh,
1 diabetes story.
okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So I grew up in a family of people with type 1. So my mom and my brother are both type 1. I don't know if I mentioned that last time, but
You did, but I've got some questions around that. So we'll park
okay,
that for now.
okay. So I grew up as a sibling of a type 1 diabetic. That was my kind of role or how I identified. And so diabetes was always around me, although it didn't affect me personally. And it wasn't until I was in my teens, I was actually involved in a study at the University of Minnesota for siblings of type 1s. And at that point, they knew that I had a delayed phase 1 insulin response. So it was a glucose tolerance test with injected glucose. It wasn't like the pregnancy glucose tolerance test where they have you drink the glucose. It was a huge syringe that they put into an IV, and they tested my blood sugar level, every 5 minutes or so after that. And I had to have these tests on a pretty regular basis. So they knew at that point that my body wasn't producing insulin normally. And I think this took place between the ages of 10 and 13, when I was between 10 and 13. So after that point, they pretty much said, well, there's nothing else that we can do. Just go on and live your life. You might become type 1 at some point. It wasn't until more than 10 years after that that I was actually diagnosed. I had graduated from college, had my whole high school and college careers that were, just living life normally. and not paying any attention to blood sugar level. So I was diagnosed in my early 20s, and it was never really that much of a shock. Of course, learning how to do everything for yourself is much different than seeing other people do it. So I got no diabetes education. That was one thing that if I were to go back now, knowing what I know now, I would have fought for more diabetes education. They said, go ask your mom. Just go ask your mom. She's type 1. Like, what on earth? Actually, the funny thing is I was diagnosed as type 2 over the course of, it was only a week or so. But because of my age, they said, oh, you're too old to be type 1. And I said, no, really, I have a very strong family history of type 1. And they said, well, you'll see a doctor next week and they can decide if you're type 1 or type 2. And of course, they took one look at my family history and said, yeah, okay, you're type 1. I don't even think I had any blood tests run at that point, but so got no diabetes education, was sent home with insulin, really rough idea of how to take it. And, I didn't live at home. I wasn't near my mom. And at that age, I was a stubborn early 20 something. So I said, okay, I'll figure this out myself. So I don't think I asked any questions, which is in hindsight kind of dumb, but that's how it goes. That's how it goes. So fast forward years, I was doing what my doctors were telling me, but I wasn't getting great results. I was frustrated. I was suffering from clinical depression. It was tough. I had all sorts of other health conditions. They kept checking me for celiac and for all of these stomach issues, and then just said, oh, you just have, like irritable bowel, syndrome, whatever. And it just kind of blanket statements and said, oh, you're doing great overall for a type 1. But I wasn't feeling great. I think that's kind of something that a lot of people just, you get kind of the pat on the head from your doctor and like, oh, you're doing fine. But you feel something's wrong. You feel that you're not doing well. You're suffering in any number of ways. And so it really took kind of hitting a rock bottom when I was, let's see, I was in Argentina. We had been traveling around a little bit. So I was living in probably the most beautiful part of Patagonia at that time, and absolutely hit rock bottom. And it was a very, very tough time, but I knew something had to change. But finding out what that was, there was no information at that time. Like I said, I was doing what my doctor said. I was suffering. My blood sugar levels were all over the place. I had severe lows almost every night. I would wake up and, at a low blood sugar level is like, it's panic. You're sweating, your heart's racing, your whole body is saying, I need food. I need, your body and your brain kind of go into self-preservation mode. And people joke saying, I ate the whole kitchen when my blood sugar level was low. And that's exactly what I would do. I would sit on the kitchen floor and be eating like jam out of the container and things like that. And it was a horrible existence. I'd wake up in the morning just completely exhausted, and it was terrible. So I had one daughter at that point, and this was kind of in between the times when both of my daughters were born, and I knew something had to change. So I started searching. Online, and I found some person on a random diabetes Facebook page that posted this beautiful blood sugar graph. Like, I didn't even know something like that was possible. It was smooth. It was nice and flat. And I started asking questions. I said, well, how on earth are they getting that? I didn't even know that was possible. And that started me down the rabbit hole. And now I know that the person who posted that was one of the admins for the Type 1 Grit Facebook group. And didn't know at that point, had no idea. I've talked to her many times since then, and just fantastic. But this information still isn't mainstream, even 10 years later. It's still not mainstream. And that just kills me, because my whole life turned around. After I changed how I ate, my whole life has improved. my mindset, my health, my stomach issues, everything has improved. And I want that for everybody. I
Yeah.
think everybody should have access to that information, but we're just not taught it. We have to find it ourselves.
Yeah, and that's so much related to the work that you're doing and getting that message out there. So I appreciate you sharing your story. There was a few details in there that I didn't know
Yeah.
about from our other conversation.
Mhm.
I wanted to ask you specifically about your brother and
Mhm.
about your mom. How were they managing the disease? And maybe I don't even know if they were managing it the same way. From what you remember, from what you recall growing up with that, what kind of memories do you have of the way they would handle things?
Is connected. No device connected.
There, at least in the 80s, the focus was much more on diet than, say, the 90s or the early 2000s. So when they were both first diagnosed, they were put on what was called the exchange plan. So you had certain numbers of carbs that you were supposed to eat, but like a piece of bread was considered one exchange. So it's a very interesting system, considered quite antiquated now, but it was a controlled diet, or at least more controlled than what most people with type 1 are eating now. Now the doctors are saying, oh, eat whatever you want and just cover it with insulin. So, and that absolutely doesn't work, you know. I think some of your other people that you've had on here talking about type 1, they might have talked about how, you know, you have this peak of insulin and the peak of carbs, and trying to match both of those peaks perfectly is next to impossible. So by eating fewer carbohydrates and using specifically small doses of insulin to cover it, it's just much safer. You have fewer blood sugar excursions. It's just so much better. But I digress from your question there about my family. But yes, it was more of a controlled carb diet. I certainly wouldn't say low carb, but at least it was a diabetes specific diet with a controlled
Yeah,
amount of carbs.
okay, so the exchange diet was controlling carbohydrates to some level, not
To
necessarily
some
low carb. So
level. Mhm.
yeah, so what, like maybe 100 grams, 150 grams, 200 grams a day? Like impossible to say, but
I've never looked into what that would mean as far as carb levels. But yeah, it was, you had a carb with every meal, but it was a controlled amount of carbs. Like you're not going to go out and eat a whole huge bowl of spaghetti or something like that. You know, you would have your piece of bread or dinner roll on the side, or you would have, you know, some rice or some pasta, you know, something like that. But you wouldn't have a meal of that necessarily.
got it.
So
Did you notice, like, in the way that they were managing it, it was like not that much of a thing? Like they would just kind of eat a lower amount of carbohydrates, dose a smaller amount of insulin, and they could manage it like well enough?
You know, I don't really remember too much about their early years of diagnosis, you know, because like it was something around me, but it didn't affect me personally. So, especially growing up, my mom was diagnosed when I was 5 and I was 10 when my brother was diagnosed. And so it just kind of felt normal, and they would kind of do their thing and I was just around, you know, not really paying too much attention to it. So it was kind of their deal, and it didn't affect me too much, I
Okay.
should say.
Any
Yeah.
complications or side effects or like scary moments, hypo moments? You don't, there really wasn't a lot of that?
No, there was one instance, and I don't want to go into too much detail, you know, about
Fair enough.
other
Yeah,
people's history here, but there were a few scary moments in there. Probably scarier in the moment because I didn't understand what was happening. You know, if I
got
could relive that now, knowing what I know, I would, you know, of course, feel much more in control because I know a lot more. And, you know, as a kid, everything seems so big and scary.
yeah,
So,
fair enough. Fair enough. We don't need to get into too many details. It's just so interesting. That wasn't even that long ago that people were, at least had some awareness around carbohydrates. And
mhm.
and what you hear today is like people have scary moments, it seems like all the time. It's really scary. And the alarms that 2 in the morning that the parents have to respond to, and kids just bouncing all up and down and up and down, and the amount of carbohydrates they're recommended from the American Diabetes Association. It's insanity. I don't know what the hell happened in like 40 years that like we knew about this, at least to help. Maybe it wasn't perfect, but things we know today, but that's just seemed to go out the window, and it's like a free-for-all now.
Yeah, if anybody wants to know about the history of type 1, read the book. I believe it's called Rethinking Diabetes by Gary Taubes. Amazing,
So
amazing
amazing.
information.
Yeah.
So
In our last chat,
that's
you
a
were in the middle of it somewhere, so
oh yeah,
I take
yeah.
it that you finished.
So yes, it's an incredible book and taught me so much about the details that have gone into these recommendations that I had no idea about.
It's crazy. Yeah, he does a great job. Such an amazing journalist telling that story. So I couldn't recommend that book highly enough as well. And then I wanted to ask you a bit about the genetic component and why some people seem to be triggered or not. Like, do you have any ideas about why somebody could have the genetic component and it might activate in one person but maybe not the other?
I don't know that there's a lot of really solid science around that. There's a lot of speculation at this point saying that, yes, there is a genetic component and there's some environmental trigger. So whether those environmental triggers are a virus, a vaccine, contaminants, who knows? It's really anybody's guess at this point. And there are so many people that have no family history. And we're seeing a lot of people who are diagnosed type 1 at various ages too. It used to be considered that it was only juvenile, and that's what it was called, the juvenile diabetes, um, just like the Juvenile Diabetes Association, which just changed their name because, of course, people can be diagnosed at any age. We do see a lot of people who are also misdiagnosed as type 2, just like I was, and many people go for years being misdiagnosed, and they're really LADA or a latent onset type 1. So it's just a slower onset.
Yeah, gotcha. I was going to ask you about that as well. Maybe we can circle back on that too.
Yep,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, it's just wild. And to have that experience of finding that flat glucose line, in an online kind of community and being able to ask questions eventually led to a very special person, somebody we've lost in this last kind of calendar year, Dr. Bernstein. Can you tell us about the experience of finding his book, and what that kind of taught you, and things you learn, and maybe even like resisted a little bit in the beginning?
I absolutely resisted. So once I saw that line and I connected with Debbie, one of the admins from Type 1 Grit, she told me about Dr. Bernstein's book. I was living in Argentina at that point, so I got the ebook version because I couldn't get a hard copy down to me. So I started with the ebook and I read it, and I absolutely hated it. I thought, nobody's going to tell me that I can't eat carbohydrates. I was absolutely resistant. So I essentially, tossed it aside. I put it on the shelf, but it was an ebook, so I couldn't really put it on the shelf. So I disregarded it, and I said that might work for some people. That's not going to work for me. I can't do that. And so I kind of continued what I was doing for a year. And I tried a few other things during that time. I tried a couple Whole30s. I tried, I was eating kind of paleo at that time, but I could not consider, giving up some of the things even that are considered paleo, that I thought, I've already given up enough here. So
Did that at the very least give you an indication that food was directly impacting how you were going to experience type 1 diabetes?
yeah, that did give me some of that insight. It was really interesting because I did a week-long vegan cleanse at one point, and that actually was really eye-opening. That showed me that, wow, food has a huge impact here. I wasn't quite seeing that quite as much when I was doing paleo, but the vegan cleanse was interesting. I would never do that again, but it showed me what I needed to see to kind of get that voice in my head saying, huh, maybe there's something to this book that you read. Maybe
Yeah,
Dr.
so
Bernstein knew what he was talking about.
Interesting. I mean, it took you a year to kind of embrace it, but once you started trying what he was recommending and got a little bit more strict, how long did it take you until you were fairly convinced this is what you were going to be doing?
A week,
One week.
maybe even less than that. Yeah. I started New Year's Day 2015, and that was going to be my, my New Year's resolution. I said, well, I can try it. I'll try it. I'll commit to maybe, a week or so, see what this is all about. And within a couple days, I was reducing my insulin because I could tell that I had just been using way too much. And of course, when you're changing how many carbohydrates you're eating, you need less insulin. And so I was reducing my insulin. I was shocked at how good my blood sugar levels were. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is working so well. I have to continue this. And a week kind of went into 2 weeks, went into a month. And I'm like, absolutely. I was all in by the time after a month, I was all in. I said, okay, this is doing far more for my health, my mental and physical health than anything else ever has. So I'm in it to win it, I guess. So,
wow. Okay.
yeah.
So for somebody who doesn't understand, like we've talked about the mechanisms and what happens, and like if you understand, the law of large numbers, the law of small numbers, like obviously what you were describing earlier, big roller coasters, big drops, you're dealing with large numbers and hitting moving targets when it involves larger numbers. I mean,
Yeah.
I think most people should understand that that's going to be very, very difficult. I can't remember the analogy that Dr. Bernstein used in his book, but it's like, isn't it like trying to shoot something as you're riding horseback and the thing is also moving up and down at the same time or something? Like you said nearly impossible, and I think that's generous to even say that
Yeah.
it's nearly impossible. It seems as close to impossible as you could possibly get. But experientially, like how it was feeling, like how your life was, take us, a day, December 30th, 2014 to a day, January 7th, 2015. Like contrast those days as far as your own just experience on what was happening that was making your life so much better.
That's a fantastic question. I've never thought about it in exactly those terms before. So thank you. Before, when I was doing the standard diabetes management, just eating normally, I was quite a baker. So I would make scones all the time. I really loved kind of pancakes and, all of those types of things. And I would be eating these all the time. But the best word I can come up with was chaotic. It was just chaotic. Every single day was chaotic. Not just the numbers that I was seeing on my blood sugar meter or my CGM, but with how I felt. Because blood sugar levels affect emotions. They affect how you're going to react to things. If I mentioned earlier with a low, you get really shaky and almost panicky. With a high, you're feeling like, you have a headache and you just brain fog and you feel terrible. And that affects everything. That affects how you react to the entire world around you. And so with all of those blood sugars, I should back up. With eating all of those carbohydrates and having all of those huge blood sugar swings, I was doing the best I can, but it still felt chaotic every single moment of every single day. And honestly, I was angry. I was angry at my pump, my insulin pump. I was angry at my blood sugar levels. I was kind of angry at the world because it just felt like everything was so out of control. And of course, this was my internal feeling. I might not have shown that externally, but internally, it felt like my entire world was chaotic. And I think with switching how I ate, with choosing fewer carbohydrates, with choosing then to use less insulin, because your body just needs less insulin with fewer carbohydrates, that chaos it died. It just went away, So all of a sudden, it's like the clouds parting and the storm is over. And it felt like such a relief. That's the best, from chaos to relief. That's the best way I can describe it.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's an amazing description. And trying to imagine angry Lisa is a bit challenging for me. I only know current Lisa. She's very sweet. She's very kind. So to imagine an angry version of yourself is quite a stretch, I have to say.
Thank you.
Wow. Okay. So practically, again, what did your diet kind of look like coming out of that? Like, what things were you eating more of? Obviously, you're dropping the carbohydrates. I think a lot of
Yeah,
people learn the word carbohydrates, where carbohydrates come from. The sources of them is not just like sugar and candy bars. It's in a lot of
right.
things that you need to reduce. I'm sure that must have been
Yep.
challenging. Obviously, there's the addiction component to things, and
Mhm,
baking is a way to show love as well. And so to kind of
mhm.
reduce some of that stuff, what did that look like as far as the foods you pretty much
Yeah.
had to eliminate and foods you could then include?
Yeah, well, I eliminated all of those baked goods that I love to make so much. And yes, there is a very social component to that. And I think that's what a lot of people struggle with. But it was also the pasta, the rice, the bread, the oatmeal in the morning. You think, oh, oatmeal's healthy, right? All of the fruit. I lived in an area that had, once again, I was in the middle of Argentina and amazing meat. So I really leaned into that. But a lot of amazing produce too. So, granted, you had all the green produce and all the vegetables, but you had some amazing fruits, and that was really hard to give up. I think the fruit was really probably one of the harder things for me because, of course, we're always taught things like that are healthy. You should have how many servings of fruits and vegetables per day, etc. So that was challenging for me. But yes, I really leaned into the amazing proteins that I had available to me in Argentina. We had some great fish and seafood as well. So that was fantastic. Um, and then really just all the green vegetables. I've always been a fan of vegetables, so that wasn't hard for me. Just learning different ways to prepare vegetables, not some of the boiled, soggy vegetables that I might have grown up with. Sorry, mom, but but
I
some of
ate a
the
lot of canned vegetables as well.
yeah, some of the different preparation methods and really letting these foods shine for what they are. We have amazing foods that are available to us that are also supportive of our blood sugar level goals.
Yeah, I love
So
that.
it,
I
it took
spent
it took a little while, but it's second nature now.
That's good. I spent 2 years living in the southern part of Brazil, one state above the very furthest south, and so I can verify the meat in that area of the world is so good. It's unlike anything else. It's the first time I ever had picanha, and it like changed my life.
Yes, yes, absolutely. It's never been the same since I left Argentina. So
For sure. Okay, another thing that we talked about last time, you've already alluded to it, but is the mental health component. And I
mhm.
still think that this doesn't get enough attention. Can you tell us about that mental health component? I see it as two different things. Like you mentioned the blood sugar and how that impacts mental health, but I also see the stress of managing things and how that would impact mental health. And they're kind of one's like emotional and one's like biochemical. You know what I mean? Like, can you talk about like, both sides of that coin? And again, like how you notice improvements not only in yourself but the people you work with your company.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a mental health expert by any means, but it's really an interesting experience that um, we talk about self-efficacy and being able to kind of create your own outcome, being able to control certain factors in your life. And for me, that has been one of the biggest changes that I know what to do now. I know how I can keep my blood sugar levels at safer, steadier um, levels. I know how I can make corrections if for some reason I do have a blood sugar level that's out of line. And so just having that sense of control over my own outcome and my own future, that alone can improve, I think, anybody's outlook on life. Just to say it's not all these external factors. It's here. It's something that I have control over. And so that's incredibly rewarding, incredibly freeing, and that's one of the biggest things that I've seen. But yes, like you said, there is that whole other side of it that um, blood sugar swings create um, mood disturbances, for lack of a better term. And Dr. Bernstein talks about that in his book, as well as some of the Diabetes University videos that he did that are available to everybody on YouTube. He talks about his early diagnosis and that he would become belligerent. He would, want to fight people because of his shifting blood sugar levels. And it really is a feeling of, absolute, like I said earlier, chaos, being out of control and not knowing what to do about it. So,
yeah. Empowering for sure, learning that you do have a say in this, you can control things. Yeah, I love that. Talking about your company, we know you were encouraged by your husband, you're a talented writer, you wanted to start writing. What was your original goal with your company? And eventually we'll ask you, how that's evolved over time.
mhm. Originally, I started with a blog. I just wanted to share my experience, not just my successes, but I also wanted to share my resistance and saying, okay, I didn't come to this decision easily. I came to it from suffering and from a whole year of avoidance. And, it's not like one of those people where you're like, oh, I was just diagnosed with this. And not to say that their experience is less, but there are some people who they're just diagnosed with type 1, and it just makes sense for them to reduce carbohydrates. I didn't come down that path. I came from a whole other roundabout path to get to low carb. So I wanted to share that too, as a way to, maybe relate to people's struggles, relate to people's resistance, and say, that it's not an easy decision, but at least for me, the rewards on the other side were so amazing that I wish I wouldn't have resisted for as long as I did.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, I'll struggle to ask this question.
Mhm.
I'm curious to
Yeah.
hear your experience where, like, you hear about R.D. Dykman and his son, and
Mhm.
he's diagnosed, and it takes him, like 30 seconds to say, like, okay, well, I just won't eat the carbohydrates. And he's kind of
Yeah.
laughed at. Gary Taubes writes in Rethinking Diabetes, and also I believe it's included in the Case for Keto, where it's somebody that he knows is told that, basically carbohydrates are now a poison to him, and he's supposed to take the insulin as the antidote to the poison. And the guy's just like, well, can I not just eat the poison? Like, how many people in your experience maybe have an inkling that, like, well, I could deal with this by just lowering the carbohydrates, but they're almost like doctrinated by the medical profession or the American Diabetes Association that, like, no, you have to have the carbohydrates. You're not going to be able to tolerate this without. Like, do you see that people are out there and, like, maybe logically have at least,
Mhm.
like, it's occurred to them, but they feel almost, if discouraged is the right word, like they're telling me not to do this, so that must be a stupid idea. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we have lots of people who say that. Their medical professionals are actively telling them that low carb is dangerous. So even though these people might be saying, well, wait a minute, I actually have better results when I eat low carb, if they've tried it, or they say, I see people who have had all these great results, and medical professionals will actively say, no, you can't do that. It causes brain damage. Your body needs carbs to live, all sorts of these things. So it's really unfortunate. And we have people who are already eating low carb, who are maybe our clients or somebody who's part of our audience. And we're hearing these stories all the time. So we actually have a list of low carb friendly providers that actually support what we're doing.
Yeah, amazing. It just seems so obvious, but I would be the same. I would feel really weird about it if my doctors are
Yeah.
telling me, I've got to do it this way. My endocrinologist, he's got lots of experience and doctor's degree. If he told me I had to eat a lot of carbohydrates, I would, I would probably listen, follow her. Like, it must be hard for people to maybe have those inklings, and be actively discouraged, like you said. Going back to, go
If I
ahead,
can add one more thing to that,
please.
particularly parents with children who have type 1, I can't fault them. I can't fault them at all for, following what their doctor is telling them, because that's a really, really scary situation. As an adult, I can make that choice for myself. But when you're taking care of a young child, the learning curve for type 1 is so steep already. Of course, you're going to do exactly what the doctor is telling you to do. So
On that note, have you found there to be like, say somebody you knew had this situation, they were a parent, they had a child. Is it like, is there a timing thing on when you want to teach the parent about low carbohydrate nutrition? Because I had an experience where a Facebook friend, went through that situation, and I reached out almost immediately, and I regretted it because I think I needed to give him a little bit more time to try what they were telling him, to try to see what a disaster it was. As he was getting at least, some education, but the wrong education. Have you found, like, is there a timing thing when you want to, like, kind of present this information to somebody?
I think that might depend on the person that it's going to. Oftentimes, I think you're right, though, that you kind of need to just get your legs under you, at least to some extent. You're, like I said, it's this huge learning curve. You're just trying to figure out the basics of it. And often then people are saying, well, wait a minute, this is kind of a nightmare because blood sugar levels are all over the place. So yeah, then maybe that might be the right time to say, okay, here's another option.
Yeah. I
But
feel like I goofed my timing by sending, like, Rethinking Diabetes, 45-minute documentary, maybe just too soon after the doctor had presented it, and maybe closed the door
no,
forever. So I kind of regret it a little bit. But anyway, just
no,
wanted
I
your
can
thoughts about that.
understand your enthusiasm though, and wanting to get that information out because it is important, and people aren't just like, you have to find it yourself or have somebody that who knows about this that is willing to, yeah.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay,
Yeah.
well, as your company has evolved, how are the different ways that you're helping people now? And I understand that there's a program you've been working on. I don't know if program's the right word, a new way to help people that's quite comprehensive. So I'd love to hear how the company has evolved over time and what things you're currently working on.
Yes, thank you. We have lots of different offerings. One of our main things is one-on-one diabetes education. And this is done with Allison Hershey, who is my right hand, really. She is a registered nurse, certified diabetes educator, and she has had type 1 since she was 18 months old. So she is an absolute expert. She is another one of the admins from Type 1 Grit, and she is phenomenal. She's doing a lot with automated insulin delivery training and optimizing the technology that we have access to right now to help people get amazing control of blood sugar levels. But in addition to that, we are so excited to be opening up our flagship offering. This is a diabetes education and support platform. So not just a course, not just coaching, not just support or community, but kind of all of that in one. So this is something that we've been working on for over a year now. We have all of our private groups in there already, and we're going to be opening it up to the public in November, which is Diabetes Awareness Month. So we're very excited about that.
That's perfect. That's right when this episode is dropping. So that would be amazing. I know last time you were on, you were starting to work on this, and you said that the private groups, you really wanted to center it around the different types of diabetes. Is that kind of the direction you decided to go?
Yes, to some extent. So it is this larger platform. It's called Your Diabetes Circles. And inside of it, we have all these little mini communities. So those are all of your individual circles. So there are different circles for our different courses. There are different circles for type 1 versus type 2 to be able to speak directly to people's needs for those. We also have a pregnancy and postpartum circle. We're working on a loop circle for people who are using looping or any sort of automated insulin delivery, really. And so we're developing all of these smaller circles to really be able to target the information and be able to talk to those specific groups. So because even though we might all be in the diabetes community as a whole, we have different interests, we have different needs. We also have a parent circle, of course. So lots of different things going on there, and we're really excited to open that up to all of our different communities.
That sounds amazing.
So
Sounds,
thank you.
yeah, very comprehensive, and I'm sure it's helping a lot of people. On that note, just maybe like the first thing that comes to mind, do you have a particular like story or a case study of somebody that's been using the platform, found the right people and has a cool story of managing much better?
Oh my goodness. Well, nothing
I
like
have
putting me on the
tons.
spot here. So, um, well, let's see. We have our diabetes redesigned program there as well, and that is a really it's a very dedicated program that is a longer term. So for most of our people in our diabetes redesign program, they start off with a 3 month or 13-week program that we walk people through. We have a weekly group call. It's very community based. And then many people continue with us for years afterwards. So we started this program in 2000, and it's still going strong, still with some of our original members in there. It's fantastic. But one thing that we have seen with the people who are the most involved in our programs is that it doesn't just affect the person themselves, but it impacts all aspects of their life. So for example, the person that has type 1 is in our groups. We work with a lot of women just because that is our demographic. But of course, men and families, etc., everybody's welcome. But for example, in many cases, it might be a female, a woman that is with type 1. And so we're helping her with her blood sugar levels, with her mindset, with food choices, with menu planning, etc. And before you know it, husband is losing weight. They're all exercising more. The kids are more active. Lunches are changing for the entire family. So it really has ripple effects through all aspects of a person's life. They're bringing different snacks to the office now to share with everybody else. And that, I think, is probably the most rewarding, to hear these stories about how it's not just impacting the person with type 1, but it really is impacting the rest of their family in a positive way, including their, friends, coworkers, grandparents, etc. So that's really, really cool
Amazing.
to hear.
That's amazing. Yeah, I would venture to probably say you saved a few marriages as you were describing what it was like to have those ups and downs in yourself. That must be a challenge for spouses as well, and children, everybody in the family, like you said. So to have those ripple effects, cool.
Absolutely. And less fear for the rest of the family as well. Like I had talked about, some of these really scary situations that a person with type 1 can be in, as far as, low blood sugar level, hypoglycemia, paramedics might need to be called, etc. If we are maintaining steadier blood sugar levels and we have better control overall, that's less fear for the rest of our family. That's less fear that I'm going to be having convulsions at night and the paramedics have to be called, so I think it leads to more freedom for the person with type 1 and their entire family.
Well said. Yeah, I love that. We go back to remember the reason why we even started a conversation, how we originally met was all about footwear. One of the passion of both of us definitely started the conversation, and I learned a lot about why it's even more important for type 1s to be thinking about, and well, really anybody with diabetes be thinking about footwear and the importance of minimalist footwear, which you're absolutely an expert in. And so, if you could, obviously, we will make the case that everybody should be wearing the minimal footwear and be as barefoot as possible. But can you explain why it's even more important for people dealing with diabetes?
Yes, thank you. I knew when I saw you wearing those Earth Runners at the at the conference that you were my people. So that was a fantastic bonding point. But for people with type 1 diabetes, particularly if they have been diagnosed for many years, maybe had less than ideal blood sugar levels, foot health can be a big concern. So this comes about in many different ways. It can be a loss of sensation. It can be a loss of circulation in the feet. It can be not detecting injury to the feet. And a lot of times those injuries come because of improper footwear. So you might have abrasions, you might have toenails rubbing against, another toe. There are all sorts of instances where you can have a foot injury, and if a person can't feel that injury because of microvascular damage, to the feet and to the legs, that can become a dangerous situation really quickly. So we are advocates. I am an advocate of wider toe boxes and zero drop in particular. So for many people, they're never going to get to be a true barefoot shoe just because um, of weaknesses in the feet. It would take a lot of work to be able to strengthen the feet, work on mobility, things like that. So, but at least zero drop in a wide toe box is a great place to start. So, and then I say work on the other mobility and strengthening exercises. So ideally you can get to be, more of a barefoot shoe, but certainly minimalist is good. Something like ultras, for example. That's something we recommend to all sorts of people.
Yeah, that's a great transition shoe. And some people may find, just like with their diet, they may want to take another step, or that might be enough of a step to take. Yeah, I'm really glad you recognized that you saw the Earth Runners and recognized me as my people. I think most people just think I'm homeless. Or my favorite that I get is this happened not last week, but the weekend before, when I'm out hiking, and like 5 or 6 different people along my path are like, "Oh, you're hiking in flip-flops?" Like, they're not flip-flops. Like, I promise you, they're not flip-flops. They're way better. That's awesome. And yeah, while we're on the subject, like if somebody does want to go to the next step of like foot mobility, foot strengthening, is there anything in particular you like recommend on that note?
Well, let's see. I have all sorts of personal exercises that I do. And I do have a list of resources for that as well. I have a presentation in one of our groups about footwear and exactly what we're talking about here, about going to the wider toe box, the zero drop, maybe not going towards a minimalist or a true barefoot shoe, at least in the beginning. But I do have all sorts of additional resources for people to learn more, as well as linking to a whole slew of exercises too.
Awesome.
So that could be a good way to go. But of course, people can get foot strengthening exercises. There's so much information available for free online. So
Yeah, there
I
is,
would
for
recommend
sure.
people do their own research.
Awesome. Perfect. And we've done several episodes on that as well, so people can find those episodes. Lisa, it's been awesome to catch up. I know how hard you work at this, and I know your passion for sharing this message is so great, because the standard information, it's terrible, and it's getting worse, and it doesn't really seem to be getting better unless people are finding people like you who are really pushing this message forward. So we're so grateful for you and your own personal experience and your willingness to share this message wide and far, for sure. So where can people go to find you and connect with you and your work?
We are at diaverge.com, diaverge, and diaVerge Diabetes on Instagram and Facebook.
Awesome. We will link to that in the show notes so that people can go and find that. For now, Lisa, like I said, it's been great to catch up. Thank you so very much for everything you are bringing to the table. Excuse me, not only for the people that are dealing with diabetes, but those around them. I think it was such an important point to say that the family, the friends, the people that also have to deal with the situation are suffering as well. So your work's incredible. And yeah, I'm very excited for you that the program is launching and is going to be made to the public. And I'm sure it'll be very successful. But for now, thank you so very much for all of the work you do. And thank you for taking time to be on our show today. We really appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Casey.
Absolutely. It's an honor to host you. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.